الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا يا رب العالمين. أما بعد. We're continuing our series of studying When Hearing Becomes Listening by Shaykh Smith, which is this book right here. And we're finishing one section and we'll begin the next section. But carrying on from our last session, Shaykh Mikhail, he mentions that, because he was talking about relational layers, how we find ourselves in many different relationships, and not all relationships are the same. And not all relationships deserve the same amount of attention and investment. Those who are closest to us deserve the most attention and investment. And then those further and further and further respectively deserve, an appropriate amount of attention. There is a question, though, that will arise here, which is, and he addresses it here by saying that we know that we must be concerned for the emotional and physical well-being of the entire Muslim community. So all of us need to be worried about the state of the Muslim community around the world, the Ummah. He says, however, but it would be extremely naive and downright sinful to assume that the entire Ummah deserves the same amount of emotional attention from you as those closest to you. He goes on to say, the impact is that we are emotionally burned out by the time we face the troubles of our own families, and while our intentions may have been noble, we're sinful for failing to prioritize. This is a powerful, I think, message, and a very relevant message for our times. In a time where it seems, subhanAllah, wherever you look, things are tragic. It feels that way at times. Whether you're looking abroad and you just kind of shake your head and can't make sense of it. You look locally, just across the border, and you have innocent people being put to death. And you just kind of wonder, what's happening? And amidst all of that concern, what he's trying to draw our attention to is, do not make the mistake of neglecting those closest to you who deserve attention from you. This is very important. It's impossible that we fully bear the emotional burden of every single tragedy and calamity around the world. You just can't do it. Because, how many countries would you be concerned about? The inhabitants of those countries. How many countries are we talking here? And the different difficulties and suffering that the people are going through. And you start to count all of that. And then you could even look locally, and you could look at different forms of suffering. And in the process, if you were to try, number one, to really keep up to date just with all the news, or if you were to try to really reflect on what's happening everywhere, you would have, as he says, you'd probably be so emotionally burned out that by the time it comes for you to face your family and what's happening in your family, the people closest to you, that you'd have nothing. And as a result, you neglect them, and then you'd be sinful, he says. You'd be sinful. You might say, well, what do you mean? Why am I sinful? I'm concerned about the Ummah, and we're supposed to be concerned about the Ummah. He says, no doubt, you're meant to be concerned about the Ummah, but not at the expense of those closest to you. And this could apply to not just the entire Muslim community. You could apply this to work. So people could be so into their work that they neglect their families. They neglect the people closest to them. It's a matter of priority here. It's not a matter of my passion. We have to be careful here. sometimes in the name of, providing for families and this and that, we're actually just fulfilling our passion, but in the process, neglecting the people who need our attention the most. We see this with parents a lot, by the way. And I say this not because I'm here to criticize your parents or something. I'm here to say that give it 10, 15 years, and if Allah wills that you should be parents, you don't want to repeat that mistake. I have spoken to many parents who told me what? All this effort that I'm putting in is for my kids. Right. But the one thing that your kids need the most from you is you. And you don't seem to have time for them. And you might say, no, I won't do that, inshallah. I won't do that. My question to you is right now in your life, how much time are you giving to the people closest to you? Right now. Don't worry about when you have kids, if you have kids. Don't worry about that. Right now, with all the different occupations you have in your life, the different things you're busy with, friends, work, school, hobbies, your own personal goals, all of that, how much are you giving to the people closest to you? Because it's not just a matter of who, if it's my kids, I'll be different. No, it's a matter of what's my process, what's my system. Is my system such that when I am passionate about something, I will give everything for it, in the process neglecting things that are more important? If that's your system, it will translate over to even when you have a family of your own, with a spouse and kids. It'll translate over. The time is now to start prioritizing. Not based on what you like to do, but what you're being asked to do by God. Does that make sense? And so that's what he's trying to say here. It's not possible for everybody to take care of everybody. This is not possible. So there should be a level of concern, no doubt. But it cannot come at the expense of the duties you have to your own closest people. Does that make sense? When we have young children that need our attention and emotional investment, but I've already given all my emotional investment elsewhere, I am accountable before God for these children. And my excuse of my work or the community or this or that is not valid. It's not valid. All of that has to be done whilst maintaining this priority right here. And may Allah forgive us, sometimes what we do is we use these other things as an excuse to get away from these close responsibilities. And so to get away from the investment in my family or my kids or my spouse, I'll just throw myself harder into work. Rather than face my emotional challenges and the relationship difficulties, communication problems, I'll just throw myself harder into my work. And I'll become a workaholic. And I'll pat myself on the back and say, what? I'm doing it for my kids. I'm doing it for the family. No, if I'm honest, I'm doing it for me. So I don't have to deal with this, because this is too much for me. And we have to be aware of this in a society that would be more than happy to have you become a workaholic, because it serves their corporate interests. So they would encourage your passion, and they would reward you for all the extra hours you put in. We have to be careful. So he says we would be sinful for failing to prioritize. Look at the Prophet ﷺ. Aisha radiallahu anha, when she described him sallallahu alayhi wasallam at home, she said he was like a normal man at home. He would be busy taking care of his family, but when the call for prayer was given, he would leave immediately. What does this tell us? Priorities. He wasn't in his head saying, Ya Allah, I'm busy with my family, that's why I don't have time to come and pray in your house. He wasn't using his family as an excuse to neglect his duty to God. Priorities. Are we using other things as an excuse to neglect our duties to Allah? They might be important. Remember that. We're not denying that those things might be important. They might have a significance in our lives. So yeah, you do got to take care of your health. Yeah, you You do have to work. You do have to do all these things. But you don't neglect your duties to God. And we see that in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Priorities. You see, we get to a point in our lives, guys. We get to a point in our lives where it's no longer about doing good. Can I be real with you here? You see, when you're first trying to reconnect with God, you know what the standard becomes? Let me just stay away from haram and bad company. That's the standard. You know what I'm talking about? Let me just distance myself from people that are really pulling me in the wrong direction. Okay? That's the standard. Let me stay away from major sins. As you grow, the standards change. The standards change. Because if you are to grow, you can't keep the same low standards. So what does that mean? That means as you grow, how do you decide if someone should be your friend? Initially, when you're starting off, if they're just a religiously inclined person, that might be enough for you. Why? Because what's the alternative for you? It might be somebody who's totally engaged in so many harmful, spiritually harmful, acts and behaviors. And so for you to just hang around with somebody for whom religion is important, that might be the standard. But as you grow, the standard has to continue growing with you. So you'll get to a point now where if you're still operating with that system, you know what you'll tell yourself? Well, I'm hanging around with these people because they're nice people. They're good people. They pray and they fast, and that's good. I'm not saying that these are bad friends. I'm saying when you're trying to grow further, the alignment has to increase. Why are you friends with the people that you're friends with? Because Shaykh, they're nice people. I'm sure they are. But do they have the same goals that you have? Are they growing in the way that you want to grow? Now, I'm very serious about this, guys. Think about this. Early on, that's not the priority. You don't even have to worry about goals and stuff, because at that, you're just trying to survive there. Religiously, you're just trying to survive. But as you grow, you get to a point where, if we're completely honest, our friends around us hold us back from further growth, because they're not ready to do it. They're not ready to grow further. And then we pat ourselves on the back saying, what? I'm hanging out with good people. And you are. They're good people. But they're not going where you're trying to go. Why would you allow them to hold you back like that? Do you understand that? Priorities. Priorities is what we're here to talk about. The Prophet ﷺ had his priorities very clear. And we have to make sure that we also have our priorities clear and that we are surrounded by people who also have similar priorities. Because you might make something a priority, but if the people around you don't make that a priority, you will constantly be conflicted. Constantly. Because they won't understand you. You're going to say, I want to go to the halaqah. And that person might be a Muslim and they pray 5 times a day and all of that. But they're going to look at you and say, just chill with the halaqahs, yo. You always going to halaqahs. Just chill. Well, let's just go out and eat some sushi. And so that's what you end up doing. And you might say, what's wrong with that, Shaykh? It's not haram. You're right, it's not haram. The question is, if you're going to consistently and repeatedly do that, who are you trying to become? And are these friends helping you become that person or actually holding you back? It's a real question to ask. Every one of us can be honest with ourselves. Right? So, this is where now the rights of the companionship of the people around us become important. And I want you to reflect on this as well. He says, upholding the rights of companionship creates a community of believers who are deeply invested in the physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being of their brothers and sisters. Companionship is the cure for loneliness, but only when one's companions understand the true meaning and rights of companionship. Another point to reflect on. What are the rights that each of us have towards each other as friends? What are the rights? Are you surrounded by people who are constantly concerned about fulfilling your rights in that relationship? Think about the friendships we have. Are we people, number one, and are the people around us such people that they're constantly reflecting on, am I fulfilling the rights of these friends around me? Imagine you had a relationship like that. That would be so beautiful, no? Like, immediately when something goes wrong, they would come to you and say, hey, I'm so sorry. I was meant to do this, but I messed up, my bad. Like, they would be concerned that any shortcoming on their part is not just going to affect the relationship, it's going to affect their accountability with God, with Allah. That's very different than friends who are constantly keeping tabs and tallies of like, what did I do for them and what are they doing for me? And you're just kind of tit for tat everything. And we're petty, where like, you didn't say this, you didn't pay that, so I'm not going to pay this. What? Do you see the difference there? That's not what's meant to be our friendships. Where we're constantly on guard for, once you've ascertained that someone is a good person, after that, do your best to like, be good to them. Ihsan. Not just like to do enough, like you did 50%, I'll do 50%, we'll be good. No. Let me do whatever I can to be the best friend to you possible. And imagine they had the same spirit, where they were like, I'm going to do my best to be the best friend to you possible. And that doesn't just mean when it comes to like eating at the restaurant, right? Where we're fighting over the bill. It's also like, I want to be the best friend to you by ensuring that not only do you live the best life here, but the best life in the next life. So that's the friend that would actually drag you away from sushi to come for the halqa. That's the friend right there. Do you get what I'm saying? You can go get sushi after, or a big slice, whatever you like. You can do what you want, right? You can do it after. But a good friend pulls you in the right direction. So there's a book, it's written by Imam al-Sha'rani. It's been translated recently. It's called The Code of Companionship. In here he outlines more than 65 rights that one companion has over their friend. And to go through these and say, wait, which of these am I fulfilling for my friend? Like, you want to be a good friend? It's something to learn. You want to have a good friend? It's something to look out for. Does that make sense? Okay. The last point we want to mention here before we switch sections is the author says, well, we have to make sure we're spending the majority of our emotional energy in the inner circles. We also have to make sure that the right people are in those circles. Look, you have to invest in the people closest to you. Your closest friends, they deserve the most from you. He says, but you got to make sure that you have the right people there too. We have to be very selective about who we allow in these circles because they shape who we are. It's tough, guys. It's tough because as you start to grow, you know how Shaytan, you know what he comes and tells you? If you try to be different. Do you understand what I mean by that? Like, none of your friends attend a conference that's taking place in Toronto. None of them ever go for it. And they're making plans, but you've already decided, I'm going to that conference. Now what are you going to do? Are you going to go to the conference? Or are you going to cancel the conference and go with them? Here's what Shaytan comes and tells you. He tells you, hey, don't act like you're so superior, okay? You think you're better than them? You really want them to also look at you and be like, oh, he or she thinks they're way better than me, going for these conferences now, totally like neglecting the plans we made. And he makes you worry about coming across as self-righteous and pretentious. Right? And think about this. Out of fear of being seen as someone who thinks they're superior, we give up on it. No, I can't do that. I don't want my friends to feel like I think I'm better than them. No. That's not going to help us when we're standing on the day of judgment, guys. it's not going to help us. And that might be a sign that maybe you're not surrounded by the right people who don't have the same goals as you. And this is serious. This is serious because you might say, well, what's the big deal, man? It's not that serious. No, it is serious. Because then you plateau. When you plateau in life and you're not growing anymore, it's one of the most dangerous places to be in. It's one of the most dangerous places. Because that's where all the diseases of the heart creep in. When you're not constantly checking yourself. And surrounded by people who are also trying to check themselves and grow. That's when all the weeds... When does the garden grow weeds? When you just stop working on it. When you stop working on the garden. You don't have to plant weeds. They'll just come. They come because of your lack of investment and effort. So who are you becoming? That's my question to you tonight. Who are you becoming? Do you have any idea? Hopefully you do. And if you have some idea of who you want to become, are the people around you, do they want to become the same person? Or even something similar? Are they taking steps? If not, I'm sorry to say this. I'm not saying to end the friendship. I'm saying you have to think carefully about how much time you really want to be spending there. Yeah. You have to think carefully about that. And it's hard because maybe these are friends that you've been close to for so many years. People that have been through very difficult moments with you. In your darkest moments, your lowest moments, they were there for you. But hey, they're at a place where they just don't want to grow further. And you do. So what do? You stay in that dark place with them and choose not to go forward out of fear of judgment. A true friend is happy to see you grow. A true friend is happy to see you grow, and even if they're not able to take those steps, but they're happy to see you take those steps. A true friend. Think carefully about this, guys. Okay, the author now shifts to talk in the second section of the book to talk about understanding communication. In this section, his whole focus is on the importance of going beyond the message to connect to those around us. And one of the main focuses in this section is on this concept of noise. We're going to come to talk about this in more detail, inshallah. Noise that arises in communication. And he goes back to say that much of the noise that gets in the way of our communication comes from within. And he says this actually, if you think about it, takes you back to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The hadith narrated by An-Nu'man ibn Bashir radiyallahu anh. It's a very well-known hadith. It's also included in the 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi, where the Prophet ﷺ says, in a lengthy hadith, al-halalu bayyinun wal-haramu bayyin, and in the ending of the hadith he says that there is in the body a piece of flesh, which if it is sound, the entire body is sound. If it's corrupt, then the entire body is corrupt. He's talking about the heart. He's saying it all goes back to the heart. See, the disease, let me clarify what he means here. Noise. So essentially, if we look at this diagram here, he bases his conversation in this section, the author, off of what's called Shannon's model of communication. This is talking about phones. So you have the person conveying a message, right? The transmitter, the source, then the transmitter. They send out their message. There's a receiver and the ultimate destination. But along the way, there can be noise. So when we think, he applies this then to human beings. He says, look, if I'm trying to tell you something, right? Let's use an example here. So I'm the person speaking. I'm the information source. I have some message I want to convey to you. I look at you. I see your shirt. I really like your shirt. So I transmit to you a message. I say, hey, nice shirt. Those are the words I said. Hey, nice shirt. I send those words across. You receive them, and ultimately you are able to comprehend them. In the middle, you have a noise source. What could that be? One more literal noise source would be that the room is so loud you didn't even hear my words. That's literally. But what the author wants to talk about are more inner noise. What's an example of that? Let's say you really don't like this shirt because maybe you think it looks like a shirt that only old people would wear. And let's say for whatever reason, your mom made you wear that shirt. So you already walked into the room insecure about this shirt. Because you're like, man, I don't know, I have to wear this shirt because my mom made me wear it, but it looks like an old person's shirt. And then I come along and sincerely I look at the shirt and I say, nice shirt. And what do? You get deeply offended. Because you think I'm being sarcastic. Right? You were like, I can't believe you said that. And you walk off. And I'm standing there confused. Because I conveyed my message. I said, nice shirt. Because genuinely, from the depth of my heart, I think it's a nice shirt. And I'm trying to give a compliment. I'm trying to invest in this relationship here, like build a connection. So I said, nice shirt. But the noise popped up. What's the noise in this case? What is it? An insecurity. And that distorted the whole message to the point that it had the opposite effect. You see how noise interferes in communication? And how often noise comes from within. So our spiritual diseases, he's talking about the heart being sick. How does that affect communication? I'll give you an example. Let's say someone has arrogance in their heart. They think that nobody can correct them. Nobody can tell them anything. Someone could come along sincerely and point out a flaw of theirs. Hey, you said X, Y, Z. By the way, that's actually wrong. I'm actually doing a PhD in it. So this is actually what it is. This person came along, privately corrected them, pointed out their mistake, did them a favor actually, so that they don't go on and keep making that mistake. Why might this message not be received? What might be the noise? The arrogance flares up and says, what? Who are you to tell me? Who do you think you are? I don't need to listen to you. You haven't even graduated. Just leave it. Right? And they reject the message because of what? Not because of the message. The message is valid. The person even showed them research to support how they're wrong. But the noise is the arrogance within our hearts. How many times we don't even want to take sincere advice? We don't even want to engage in a friendly conversation. Why? Because we're jealous of somebody. Someone we're jealous of comes up, we're jealous of them. They come up to us and they say, sit down. How are you doing? And a part of you is just hearing ooh, you're rubbing in my face. Right? You're just rubbing in my face. No, they're not. They're trying to be, maybe they have no idea that you hate them. They're just trying to be friendly. Do you get what I'm saying? How our diseases of the heart affect our communication by producing noise that distorts and impacts the conveyance of the message. Does that make sense? The author says, the body may experience the external physical reality, but it is our internal faculties of the mind that assess and interpret all experiences. This is relevant because the beginning of communication is all about understanding that our perceptions may or may not accurately reflect reality. When you're younger, you think that there is a perfect alignment between your perception and reality. You see something and you don't see it as your perspective. You see it in your head as that's what it is. You cannot separate between there's a reality and then there's my perspective of it. Because maybe you're just too young. A huge leap in maturity is to realize, wait, reality is what it is. Maybe my perspective is wrong. Number one, my perspective is something separate from reality. And then two, it could actually be different. I can't change what happened, but I can change my perspective. And you often struggle with it when you run into someone else who has a different perspective. And if you're mature enough, you'll realize, oh, so I guess there's different ways to think about this. How many of y'all have had that moment where you were forced to debate, maybe in school or something, and you were like, but I kind of see the point on both sides. You start to realize, wow, if I just look from one perspective, it seems as clear as day, this is the conclusion. I take the other side and I'm like, oh no, this looks pretty clear from this side that this is the case as well. And then you're like, what? How could it be both? And then you're really confused. Because it is what it is. But then how could you have two different conclusions? It's perspective. It's such a massive sign of growth if you develop this. And you begin to apply this to your life. Someone says something, and we could jump to a conclusion, which is what? This is what they said. For example, I'll show you an example. Right? Because sometimes we don't remember the words. We just remember what it meant to us. So someone says, you didn't put enough sugar in that. You know what they said about me? They said I'm a terrible baker. No, that's not what they said. That's what you understood. But that's not what they said. That's your perspective. That's your interpretation. What if they meant something totally different? Is it possible that they meant something different? Yes. No, I'm serious. When you start to separate the two and go, I shouldn't be so confident in my interpretations and judgments. Because again, maybe they're being informed by the noise, my own biases, my own insecurities, right? I've shared this before. This is William Perry's scheme of intellectual and ethical development. We start off with what's called dualism, that there's just facts in the world. There's only right and wrong, true or false. I know I can learn this if you just tell me what I need to know. The world is black and white. You know, young kids, that's how it is. For a young child, the world is black and white. That's why when you tell a young child, I've spoken about this before. When you have a young, I've seen my son do this, right? Like I've told him, hey, you shouldn't drink this. It's really bad for you. Don't drink too much pop, right? So then that's the rule. In his world, black and white. Pop is bad, and staying away from it is good. And it applies to everybody. We pull up to a family function, and he will walk up to an elder in the community and say, hey, why are you drinking pop? It's bad for you. I'm like, no, that's not that right application of that, right? But for him, it's black and white. Pop is bad. That's it. Whether it's for him, whether it's for like the senior, the imam, it doesn't matter. And like then you have to draw nuances. No, it's bad, but it's because you're younger, and even if it's bad, they're elders, they can do what they want. You're not allowed to go tell them. You should draw all these like arbitrary rules for them in their eyes. Like, what do you mean? But that's where you start getting to multiplicity. Oh, that's one view. And someone else has a different view. Also, there's a bunch of different views. And people become very distrustful at that stage. I don't know if you've ever been through a phase like that or seen people in that phase. Everything's just an opinion. You tell them like, but this is the case. Oh, that's your opinion. Yeah, the health experts say, yeah, that's your opinion. Everything's just an opinion. And they just don't trust anybody about anything. They move past dualism, but they move to this place of non-commitment, where it's all equal. They still act. Here's the interesting thing. At this stage, people still act. Because you can't not act. They're either going to drink pop or not, right? They can say it's opinion or not opinion, and they'll be like, well, I'm going to choose to drink pop. Why? Is it the right thing to do? That's my opinion. And so just being an opinion is good enough. And so you get to a relativistic position where you start to choose certain things not based on like reasoning, but just based on, well, everyone is free to do what they want. And they're right in doing it. Why? Because right is determined by someone choosing it. You chose it, so it's right for you. Speak your truth. You understand? Like your truth and I have my truth. We all have our own truths, and truth loses meaning. It's all just relative. Eventually, you have to get to a point that you need to, because you can't live like that. Otherwise, you're just susceptible to your nafs, doing whatever your nafs takes you. You have to get to a point where you say, no, if I'm going to commit my life to something, I got to think it through. And I have to reach to the best of my ability what I believe to be correct. Not because it's appealing to me or not, but because to the best of my knowledge, it's what I believe to be the truth. With a capital T. But I'll still maintain that I could be wrong. And so you have this position of humility. You're not arrogant about it. Does that make sense? Imagine we approached communication like that. It's not black and white. It's not black and white. Shaykh in his other book, he has a statement that his father used to say to him. His father used to say to him, son, it's not always what you say, it's what they hear. So the person says, hey, I just told them that they did this wrong. But what did the other person hear? You think I'm a terrible person. Right? So, we're going to talk more about that, inshallah, going forward. The ability of the human being to not only understand and internalize what's being said, but also to then communicate their own message whilst in a manner that actually is tailored to the person in front of you. So we'll talk about that, inshallah, in the next section. For now, we'll stop here. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us tawfiq to be people who are aware of the importance of investing in the people closest to us. May He grant us the ability to work on always becoming better and closer to the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May He grant us the ability to become people who learn the art of communication so that our relationships can prosper. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.